Let's go.
This is the Ray and Adam Show, brought to you by inplayLIVE. The Ray and Adam Show, a podcast where Ray and Adam, two professional sports bettors and brothers, talk about all things sports investing, sports betting, and how to profit in the long run from betting on sports and fantasy football. And now, the Ray and Adam Show, brought to you by inplayLIVE.
Let's go. Razor, this is a big one.
Yeah.
This is a big show.
Super excited to not only have read that article, but to have learned that you found the guy, and we've got him on the Ray and Adam Show today.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Like we've had guests on this show, you know, like people that you and I grew up watching and cheering for and cheering against, and, you know, lots of celebrities. And here we've got this guy named Danny Funt, who neither one of us even knew existed 3 weeks ago. And like, I couldn't sleep last night. I was so excited about this one. So, but before we do that, we were off last week. We took a little bye for American Thanksgiving. How's the last couple of weeks been for you? Good couple of weeks.
Good. Yeah. We were laughing about American Thanksgiving and how Canadians get like all the benefits of the sports without the commitment of, you know, suppers and family and all those things, which we obviously love, but man, we just get to pit in and enjoy the show. So
it's the best of all worlds.
Well. How about you?
I don't have to get up at 6 a.m. and stuff a turkey. I don't have to worry about, like, you know, not that I don't love all my relatives, but like, you know, I can just sit and make bets in my living room all day. I blocked off all the meetings for my day job. It was wicked. It was awesome. It was a beauty. Great day. Loved American
for
Thanksgiving.
supper on Thursday.
What's that?
I said I don't even recall what I had for supper on Thursday.
I know it wasn't a turducken or stuff. I probably just ate some wings.
Yeah, it wasn't a turducken.
No. And I love that. It's we get the best of all worlds in Canada with this stuff. We get to enjoy American Thanksgiving without all the work. So yeah, I love it. So for those listening to the show, whether this is your first time listening to the Ray and Adam Show or you've been here a bunch of times, we're going to give you just a little background on what this show is all about before we bring our guest on. So Ray and I are both members of a group called inplayLIVE. It's a group based in Vancouver, but they have members all over North America, and I think we've got a few people in Europe in the group too. Is that right? I think so.
Definitely.
Basically, what this is, if you have any interest whatsoever in betting on sports, and you want to learn how to do it in a way where you're going to become profitable and you're willing to put real work in to do this, it's a great group for you to learn about. There's coaching. They have one-on-one coaching for you that you can subscribe to, where they'll teach you everything from how to manage your bankroll to how to learn certain strategies in certain sports, how to avoid this, how to do that. They also have professionals that you follow where you'll actually watch the games with them while the games are going on, and they'll educate you and teach you how to bet on sports while you're watching the games that you're already watching. So if you are out there, if you have any interest in taking your sports betting to levels that have likely never occurred to you, I can't recommend this program enough. And if you I don't want to sound like I'm selling steak knives, buy now, things like that, not like that. But if you go to our Twitter page and our Instagram page, or no, I don't know if the promo code's on the Instagram page, but on our Twitter page, go to @Ray and Adam Show, and you will see a link to a promo code. It's the pinned tweet, and you will see a link to the promo code that will save you $50 a quarter on your membership. That's $200 a year US. It will save you if you use our promo code. I just have a funny feeling that this is an episode that is going to go a little bit viral in the sports betting world. So we wanted to make sure everybody understood that. without further ado, we're going to bring on our guest today. So Andrew Pace, who is the founder of InplayLIVE, he's joining us, and Danny Funt, who wrote a really, really great article in what was it, 3 weeks ago, Danny?
A couple weeks ago, yeah.
A couple weeks ago, yeah. And he exposed something that, frankly, I think a lot of people in the betting world have been really, really keen to see somebody talk about. And that is the way that the books are allowed to operate in terms of fairness, right? And before we move any further with this, I want to make something super, super clear. So we are not a group that is saying, the books are bad and it's us against them and blah, blah, blah. Not at all. We recognize, I'm a business owner. I recognize that the books have a business to run. I recognize that they're interested in making profits. We all recognize that. And some books are going to be better than others, right? Like we recognize. So this is not about, pissing on Superman's cape, or, is that a saying? No. How's that work? Don't step on.
No, you don't tug on Superman's cape.
Well, if you don't tug on it, you probably shouldn't piss on it either, if we're being honest.
I don't think you don't piss into the wind.
That's what it is. Yeah. So don't piss in the wind and don't tug. We're not trying to do any of those things.
And you don't mess around with Jim Crochet.
Yeah, don't mess around with Jim.
Just play the song.
Yeah. There you go. So, anywho, I really want to make sure that that's understood by everybody. We don't want to cause a war, but we're not going anywhere, and the books aren't either, right? Like, the sports betting world is in the second inning, as far as I'm concerned, on its growth trajectory. It is going. Well, this is the new poker, right? This is what this is. This is the new poker. And, this is something that is going to be in many households all over the world for years to come. And so it's the purpose of us doing the show, and the purpose of us talking to Danny and Pacer today is just out of a sheer desire to get maybe a little more fairness, overall fairness, so that every book is operating under the same conditions in every jurisdiction, which is, ultimately the goal. So all we want is fair. And for those wondering, that fairness can go the other way too, right? There are a lot of bettors out there who, the way they make money is they sit around and they watch for nothing but broken lines or hanging lines, or, they try to take advantage of errors that are made with the books. And that's how they try to make their money. We don't believe that's right either, right? Like, we think that it should be fair on both sides. So, but we're going to talk about it. Danny, thanks for coming, man. We're really, really glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Danny, I think my favorite part of your setup is for those of you who are just listening on Spotify, this is also going to be on YouTube. Danny has an LA Lakers little mini basketball hoop over his shoulder, hanging off his door. Have you ever seen the movie Fletch, Danny?
No.
So it's one of my all-time favorite movies. I actually named my youngest son Fletcher after that character in that movie. And
you
he's
also
the biggest.
Said that you named him after London Fletcher.
Well, it was a combo. Ago. It was named after a combo of London Fletcher and Fletch. It's both. Yeah. It's true. You're right. But Fletch has an LA Lakers net in his house and or his apartment, and it I don't know. It just reminds me of it. It's great. So, Danny, what made you write that article? What turned you on to this? Are you a sports bettor? Is this something that you're already into? Tell us your story. Who are you? Where'd you come from? And why'd you write this article?
Yeah, I've been excited to cover the business of sports betting recently. I'm not a very sophisticated bettor. I'm not a super experienced sports journalist. In the past, I covered the media. And one thing that jumped out to me when states started to legalize was you've got this sort of strange opportunity for a version of insider trading when, reporters know these things, they sort of by definition are insiders, like they literally are called insiders in some cases. So
totally.
You can imagine these cases where a guy could make a bet and then tweet out some news 5 minutes later and make a killing doing that. So that's kind of what got me into it. And then just as the business has taken off and it's such a huge story on so many different levels, I've been excited to be covering it. And then with this limit story, I think that I heard from guys who said they've been limited. And when you brought up fairness, that's what really jumped out to me about why this is so relevant, because as you dig into it,
Really?
it's a very complicated question. And there's even a question of like, does fairness apply here? Or can you think of it in such a cold-blooded business sense that the books can do whatever they want and it's a business and fairness isn't applicable? So yeah, just hearing from both sides about that, I was really found interesting. And like you said, I think there's empathy on both sides of the counter for, how this should play out. Like there are bettors who understand that bookmakers, have to make money, have to impose limits at some point, and bookmakers who understand that, there's a way of being even-handed here. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting fundamental questions that limits raise.
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting, right? Like Ray and I, it was really funny. Ray and I and our two buddies, John and Harry, we were betting just like before inplayLIVE, was just the four of us. And I didn't even know, and this will tell you how good I was at betting on sports back then. I didn't even know that was possible, that a book would limit you. And then like our buddy John, he's like, yeah, no, once you reach a certain amount, like they'll kick you off. And then Ray and I decided that it was going to be our goal to eventually get kicked off by a book. And we always said that we're going to go buy a Dairy Queen cake to celebrate when that happens. Right. And I'll never forget, like the first time it happened, like you're like, yeah, we won. Like we finally won. Like they waved the white flag. They just said uncle, like they've had enough. And it was the best feeling in the world. But after a while, it starts to get a little old, right? Like it's just like jeepers, like really again, like it's getting old. It's interesting, right? Because if you look at the betting world as a game where two sides are opposing each other, right? Which is what it is. And just because it's a game doesn't mean it has to be nasty. I mean, any game can be fair. But if it's the bettors versus the books, name me a game anywhere else in the world, like a sport or a game of any kind, that one side gets to decide all of the rules and there's no referee. How is that game possibly going to be fair at the end of the day, right? Like imagine if you're playing a game of football and one side gets to decide how every play is going to be ruled and the other side has no say in that. How do you think, people are going to look at that game? Are they going to look at that game and go, oh yeah, no, that's the way it should have gone? Of course not, right? Of course not. And it's one of the things that I think is really interesting about this betting space is that different regions place different weighting on the need for that quote unquote referee of the game, right? Did you learn anything about how different jurisdictions are regulating this space? Because in many of the places in North America, this regulation is relatively new, right? Like I don't think there's anywhere. Pacer, is there anywhere that's older than 3 or 4 years? Probably not. Hey,
2018, New Jersey.
2018, so 4 years. So that's the oldest jurisdiction is 4 years old.
In North America, not in Europe. In Europe,
yeah.
And that obviously excludes the fact that there's been access to offshore books. And Trampus just said Nevada, which is obviously very true as well. There's been sports betting in Nevada since the dawn of time, and
I'm talking about the online.
The 1960s paper slips are still what's being produced in Nevada, so they haven't really progressed with the times, unfortunately. But I mean, the legalized regions, obviously 2018 was the first in North America, but there is sort of a Bill of Rights and terms and conditions and how things are supposed to be handled from the books, even from the Maldives and Curacao and the offshore books. They still do have you're talking about no referee. They still do have referees. The referees are just a part of it, right? So yeah, well, and the referees are, who are they going to answer to? They're not going to answer to, peons like us. They're going to answer to the, people that really run the show. So exactly.
Danny, what kind of feedback have you had from your article? And for if anybody's wondering about this article, we are going to post it. Can we post the link to the article right on the podcast link? Okay, perfect. So when you open the podcast, you can see that. Wow, how the hell am I supposed to know? I barely turned my computer.
Can you post the link with the post? Yes, you can. There we go. That's why you're the host of the show. That's why you're the host of the show, my friend.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the producer. I can't organize shit. So yeah, that's great. What kind of response have you had, Danny? And were you surprised by some of the feedback you got on this?
Yeah, it's been a pretty positive response, and a lot of people just grateful that these issues are being brought to light. If I could just say one quick thing about what you were saying earlier about the regulatory landscape. I try to be as neutral as possible and when discussing this, because I'm not really an advocate for one side or the other. But one thing I do think is just kind of bogus is you've got some states that say you can limit anyone you want, and some other states like New Jersey that I cited in the piece that say, I think the state Supreme Court has ruled that you can't boot someone like purely on skill. They have to, I guess, break terms or break some rules or something, but then you can limit them as much as you want. So if you can limit a bettor to a penny a bet, that you might as well be booting them. So that's really like a face palm thing to come across. It's such a obvious loophole there. But people seem really happy that this is being brought to light. And I hope to keep digging into this stuff.
Pacer, can you give us some examples of, and we'll talk about the places that aren't being regulated properly and how, ridiculously unfair some of that ends up being. But in your mind, Pacer, I mean, you've been on the front lines lobbying with, different provincial and state regulators to get, to create fairness. In your mind, what's the best model for this, and where does that currently exist?
Well, there is no place that it currently exists. And I think one of the biggest things is to speak to the point that you first brought up about, we're not at war and we're trying to find fairness and that sort of thing. And I think that there is an opportunity for everyone to coexist, right? And how that exactly looks, I don't necessarily have the answer to right now, but I think one of the biggest things is that, as a general statement, not specific to any one region, is that the regulators involved in all of this were thrown a little bit of a curveball, from the sense that everyone was really excited about getting betting legalized, about the new, the new revenue streams for corporations, advertising the betting right directly into the sports broadcasts, the excitement associated with responsible gaming, and how much that can add to the love of the sport and the game when done professionally and responsibly. But then the real curveball, I think, came when they realized what the books were capable of doing and how to coexist with the books, where you require them to be profitable for your region, your state, your province, whatever, in order to receive the benefits that you had hoped to receive from regulation. That was something that was extremely important, obviously, to the government.
Can you go into that a little further? Yeah, can you dig a little deeper into that, Pacer?
Well, the sports books, when it comes to actually becoming legalized in a state, the taxation on those books' profits is a huge reason for the legalization.
Of course,
it's almost like the government. Obviously, people know that there's tons of debts and things like that. Governments kind of if any one specific government was a business, that business would be belly up and everyone would be shorting the stock like crazy. So governments find themselves digging holes and borrowing money like crazy. And the sports betting landscape, as a general statement, was it's to make some more money off of the billions and billions, 400 billion illegal dollars were wagered in the United States in 2017. So it's to capitalize and get the taxation on something that's already happening. And then when those books then, of course, come out and they are struggling with profitability, then the correlation relating to why you actually did this in the first place gets questioned, because you go, where are the profits that we were expecting from the legalization of sports books? And that's where sharp bettors, winning bettors, professional bettors, do really need to understand that fairness and coexisting is possible, but there is also that side of it where, if we just make money until, we can't make any more kind of thing because, we have all the money in the world, it wasn't a success, right? So there's a space for everyone. And the thing is that when it comes to sports books themselves, ironically, it's the offshore books that actually know how to do it right. They're the ones that love sharp action. They balance out their lines with sharp action. You get 80% of the public or 90% of the public on one side of a game, and that's why you have sports books like Pinnacle and Bookmaker and CloudBet that allow a $130,000 click of the mouse on the other side of that game, and their action is balanced with one click by one sharp whale style player. And they love sharp bettors because they balance their action and ensured the profitability on that one particular game. And there are books that are doing it right and know how to handle sharp bettors. Not only that, they know where they're soft, and they put those soft lines out there as feelers. They know when the action's going to come in from those sharp bettors, when those soft lines come out, so that they can identify you, categorize you, and place you in a bucket of a certain class of player that they now know will balance action at certain times. So you'll see a book like Pinnacle that won't have hockey lines open late. And then all of a sudden you go, holy shit, why is there a hockey line open right now? Why is it better than everywhere else? They're balancing their action and they're doing it in real time. That presents huge opportunities for people like us. But I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is that you can coexist in the space if you know how to run your book properly. And the biggest thing is what these guys are doing is, rather than treat us fairly, they are not running their books to the degree that they need to get to for this fairness to occur. And rather than fixing things, they're running from the problem. They're clawing back wagers from players. Yeah. They're reversing bets. They're limiting players for very small amounts of profitability. And the real one that gets me is they're advertising. Danny, I loved your article and how they use that as an ad. But you see Aaron Paul, and he's like, everything I will ever need to bet on live sports is in my hand right now. Well, that's not true, because they're going to limit you after 2 or 3 wagers. We have stories of, guys that started with $100 that made turn $20 in profit betting $1 units that have been shut down. That is the definition of responsible gaming. So and again, it isn't about war or attacking them, but it's going, hey, how are you preaching responsible gaming and then not even able to take that action? It just doesn't add up.
Danny, what were some of the stories that you came across in, like, how did you gather your info? Who were you talking to when you wrote this article? Were you interviewing the books? Were you interviewing sharp bettors, professional bettors? Like, how did you source all this info for that article?
All of the above. I find with any reporting, it's good to find someone you respect and then ask them who they respect, and then ask that guy who they respect. And you find some knowledgeable people that way. To Andrew's point about responsible gaming, I think that's a really important one. And it screams out in a lot of examples you hear about. Like, people tell me that they started at a book and they were down thousands of dollars and they're getting all sorts of promotions thrown at them.
Yeah.
And as soon as they start turning their luck around, they get limited. So it's like, if you're egging me on when I'm losing and you're cracking down on me when I'm starting to be more, bet more intelligently, how does that square with all these themes of responsible gaming? So yeah, you hear that all the time.
So what would the book say? Like, did you ask anybody from the books that question, and what did they say?
I asked a bunch of people. Part of it, they say, is that it's just a simple business decision. Like, if you can make more money doing something, what do you owe 1% of your customers or 5% of your customers, to let them, take money from you. Some of them said that it's a technology problem. So a lot of this is automated. It's difficult for some of the software to, like, let's say you're winning at one sport and losing at another. In an ideal world, maybe you'd have different limits for each of those sports, but the software isn't that sophisticated. So you kind of get a blanket limit that can be very frustrating. And then another problem is just like, if you have, 50 plus operators in North America, like that takes a lot of, talented staff to manage that efficiently. And a lot of these books are just spread too thin and shorthanded. And maybe that's just a lack of staff available. Maybe that's kind of cheapness on their behalf. You'll hear different things from different people, but
that's actually a super interesting point. Like, just think about it within a group like inplayLIVE, right? Like, we've got, Pacer, how many quote unquote certified pros do we have? What, 150 ish?
Certified pros, like it's 25.
Oh, there's 25. Okay.
Yeah.
So
if you mean six-figure club, it's well into the hundreds. Well into the hundreds.
Yeah. Okay. So, like use inplayLIVE as an example, right? You have all these very intelligent people who are gaining more intelligence and traction along the way. And, we love the cat and mouse element of this, right? Where, we look at the lines, the books are adjusting to this, the books are adjusting to that, no matter what sport, they're constantly adjusting, and it's going to constantly be this game of cat and mouse. But I've never thought about it until now. How many people do they have on their staff at, the medium-sized books? And how many, and what are their chances of those people adjusting the lines in such a way that they don't worry about us beating them? It's actually a really, really interesting question when you think about it in terms of just the resources they have, right? Because they're if like a small book would have thousands of members, so it's whatever they've got for their staff and their odds makers against thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So it's a super interesting. It's a super interesting scenario. I've actually never thought of it that way until just now.
Well, I think the thing is, though, too, is you have to understand is almost every single one of these books is, almost a third party face of the odds provider themselves, right? So the odds provider is who will have the people that are actually providing those lines to them. And the book itself is more obviously the shell, that sort of goes over those odds and those lines. But then also, of course, how they're going to handle everything, their marketing, their advertising, all that sort of stuff, which obviously then includes, the VIP incentive programs that they have. And, all the ways that they sort of rope players in as a business, which they are, of course, welcome to do with free bets and bonuses and tier statuses and all that kind of thing. It's just, of course, that is all geared towards losing players, right? And then once you win, all of that gets stripped from underneath you, and it is a part of the past. And you can actually see it in real time. And I think everyone in this chat that's following live, not necessarily the people that are watching this afterwards, has direct experience with obviously, having some sort of VIP status, whether it's free bets, hockey tickets, iPads, tickets to football games. A ton of the guys from inplayLIVE were, all around the Phillies stadium for the World Series on a regular basis, and really getting these incredible perks. And then obviously that all gets stripped away with those limitations. But then what happens is their VIP host still reaches out to them and says, hey, what's going on? Haven't seen you've deposited, blah, 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 blah. And there's a disconnect there that the books
don't even know.
Yeah, there's a disconnect there where the books intentionally do not coordinate directly with the odds provider so that they can then hide behind it from a customer service standpoint. You reach out to the books and you say, can you please provide a rationale for why I'm no longer able to wager? And they will not answer you. They respond with, it's a business decision made by our trading team, and we cannot discuss any other details. And that's where you then
such a load of crap.
Well, it's a total load of crap. But again, do the sports books suck when they do that stuff? Sure. But this is where the regulators are, I don't want to say they're in over their head. This is where they have been thrown the curveball of how the hell are we going to handle this where we still remain profitable and have the promises that, we made to legislation and the people of this state or province about why we are legalizing sports betting and the benefits to communities and roads and whatever the hell else the money goes to, where now we are seeing how this business actually operates. And I can tell you firsthand, they did not know how these businesses operated.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Danny a question and I'm going to come back to that, Pacer. Danny, in some of the conversations that you had, particularly with maybe some people on the regulation side, did you get any indication that there's a desire to change any of this, to create more fairness, or was it sort of like, yeah, we know it's an issue, but don't hold your breath?
Yeah, that definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't report this personally, but everything Andrew's saying about some of these problems kind of blowing up faster than anyone on the regulatory side anticipated definitely sounds spot on.
Yeah.
I just think with so much of this stuff, there's like this imbalance of advocacy where like you've got, these big, powerful corporate interests, pushing their how they want these rules established, and you don't really have a counterbalance of the public. So it's so skewed. And if the state's goal is just to maximize tax revenue, what'll it take for some changes to be made? I asked a lot of people, like, whether they're the books or the regulators, like, could this get so egregious that it just demands reform? And people didn't sound too optimistic of that.
Pacer, you said that, you've had conversations that surprised you in how little knowledge they had of this stuff going on. Was it the Ontario regulators that you were talking to, and they didn't even know that that they would kick off winning bettors? Was that the story? Refresh my memory.
Yeah, well, you know what, just in case, from the standpoint of longevity, just in case, an Ontario regulator is listening to this right now, the first thing I'll say is that they have expressed a willingness to improve. And I think that is really important to recognize. And they have shown humility in showing that they didn't entirely understand the landscape and they are working on it. And that's where...
Right. Yeah, what I said wasn't necessarily meant to be a shot. It was
no, not at all. I just want to...
they were new at this and they didn't understand it. Yeah.
So one of their biggest things that they said is they believed that with 70 plus operators being legalized, that essentially a competitive business market would not have these practices occurring in any capacity.
Oh, interesting.
So they were stunned.
So they thought the free market would sort it out.
Yeah, they were stunned.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were stunned. And I think that's where I think what Danny has done. Danny, if you haven't seen it already, there's a phenomenal article, very similar to story to yours, written by someone at covers.com. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. Just about some of the stories, not the same as yours, but some of the stories that have occurred to some of the bettors in the regulated landscape. And I think that's where, a powerful voice, a group like inplayLIVE, and then having someone and other reporters like yourself, Danny, that aren't afraid to tell the story. And I'll be the first to say, tell all of it, tell their side. Like, we're more than happy to hear, what their rationale is. I think, unfortunately, is like we have a couple reporters inside of our group as well that we've been working with. And then when you actually reach out to the PR side of these companies, they're going without response most of the time. So it's really hard to get their sort of answer or response to all of this. But the thing is that in today's day and age, I mean, we've just gone through the whole cancel culture movement. You go, hey, you know what? If you're treating people this way, we live in a world where there's internet and podcasts and Twitter and everything else. Like, your story is going to be exposed. So we're not sitting here trying to say, we're going to expose you. We're sitting here going, we know who we are. We know who you are. We know what you want. We know what we want. Can we not figure out a way, like some of the other sports books, to actually create a landscape of, this fairness that Adam has sort of referred to? And on that note, what we've done, Danny, is we've tried to, as best as we can, find out the regulatory body of each area that is legalized in Canada and the United States, so that when we do have an issue, we at least report it. We're getting some pretty brutal responses. A generic copy-paste email that says it's up to the provider, not us. Have fun with them, basically, for lack of a better term. But, we have continued to report every sort of malpractice that we've gotten as a group. And that's where I say to you, if you want to continue telling the story, you've got thousands of them at your fingertips now. And if there was any way that you wanted to be contacted or someone to be contacted where you could begin to compile some of this stuff for to continue your story, you have come to the right place, my friend. We don't have one or two stories. And I quite literally am being honest. We have thousands of stories. I'm into the hundreds of stories personally myself. But at the same time, I'm also not the best example. No one's going to feel sorry for me not winning as much as I could have from the sports books, given my past with it all. But there's definitely some people, like I said, like these $100 bettors betting $1 wagers that are being shut down, where you just shake your head and go, how can you preach responsible gambling when that's your approach, right?
Pace, can you go ahead?
Go ahead, Danny.
Danny.
No, Ray.
Ray. Go ahead, Ray.
That's Pacer meet Ray.
So that's my question then. If we're going to sit here and try and create a win-win-win to create tax revenue, to create profitable sports books, and to create an environment that's fair for people who depend on betting for their livelihood, then what is that answer? Because I like, it's not simple, but I'd like to know what you would suggest if you were sitting there and trying to create a win-win where everyone can look at each other and say, yeah, we can all live with this.
I'd like to hear that answer from both of you guys.
Yeah, that's something we've thought about a ton. And I think that there's certain bettors that probably wouldn't be thrilled with what I would propose. But at the same time, I think that there does really need to be, this sort of opportunity that does allow for people to coexist. The first simple answer is look to a book like Pinnacle. They didn't just start doing it. They've been doing it for over a decade. They allow winners to continue to play, and they're extremely profitable. And I would actually love to see the data on the percentages that Pinnacle pays out the Ontario government relative to the other providers, to see how well they actually deliver on continuing to let winners play. So that would be the first simple answer. The second is that inplayLIVE, and one of our prominent members who's kind of orchestrated all of this stuff, he's created a better Bill of Rights with some of our certified pros. And the better Bill of Rights is essentially, something that we're working on with the regulators that they're aware of, and a nonprofit company called RGC, that's stands for Responsible Gambling Committee, and they're global. And the whole idea behind the Better Bill of Rights is to just have, very simple staples that actually protect the player, because player protection is a huge problem right now. You've got lobbyists, you've got government, you've got regulators, you've got the providers, and it's all profit driven, and it's all at the expense of the player. So when it comes to player protection and the Better Bill of Rights, Ray, what we're looking for there is very simple things: fast payouts, maximum bets displayed. You guys know what the difference is like when you see a maximum versus not. We are totally comfortable in a landscape where the maximums are reasonable. So we don't need to be clicking for 5 figures at a time. No one's going to feel sorry for us.
Dig in on that just a little more, Pacer. So when you talk about kind of the max profit, you're talking about, for this particular market, the most that you can win on a wager is 10 grand. And then on this market, it's 1,000, but it's the same for everybody. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And that might mean that the max profits of some particular, markets or situations based on action taken might need to be quite low. It might need to be in the 3 figures, right? It might need to be in the 100 to 900 ish.
Right.
range.
And so, and these things you'd be talking about, kind of the obscure markets. You highlighted it really nicely in your article, Danny, about how many of the books, they'll entice you to come over because they offer lines that are fun, right? Like player props and this and that. That's what gets you in the door. But then if you bet them too much, it's like, whoop, that's not what you're supposed to do. Get out of here.
So the single greatest piece of profitability to the sports books is one thing. It's volume. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. So as volume increases, those maximums can be dynamic, right? If you have now taken on enough action to take 5 and 6 figure wagers, leave that with the provider. And I think that's totally fine. I think more than anything, it's when you are no longer taking action or you no longer are taking sharp action. I personally believe that's a reflection of your inability to manage and run your book. Anyone that's made money off of a sports book knows maybe you caught a bad line once. A lot of books claw that back. And I look at stuff like that and I go ahead, claw that shit back. Like, I don't care personally. If you caught someone and they made a mistake and you bet it, I don't care about that stuff. Some people will say, oh, they should pay and all that. I don't care about that. I'm talking about the actual legitimate ways that you beat them with their lines that they're offering you. If you run your book properly, all I'm doing is balancing your action when I'm a sharp bettor. So that's where I look at it. And those are some of the things that are being included in the Better Bill of Rights that hopefully we won't get all of them to go through, but hopefully some of them go through that allow for a little bit more player protection. And hopefully the voice of the player to the regulators continues to remain prominent. Danny, I can tell you firsthand that the covers.com article that I'm referencing was written about Ontario specifically, which, if you don't know, is the second biggest betting market in the world to New York now. Sorry, in North America to New York. And New York's brand new. So it's a huge amount of money coming in there, and a very small team that's working on it. And yeah, they're completely overwhelmed, but at the same time, they are listening. And I think that if I had a message to anyone that's reporting on this kind of stuff or experienced any of these issues, it would be find your local regulator, report the malpractice that's happened with as much detail as possible. And when you get the generic response, don't give up. Keep letting them know why and how what happened to you wasn't fair, isn't in line with responsible gaming and regulation, and obviously needs to continue to change for the better for not just them, not just the individual. It's for the players as a whole, for the industry. Yeah.
Danny, same question for you. What would from what you've seen so far, and I'm actually like, Pacer's answer was surprisingly balanced for somebody who's so motivated by one side of the conversation, which was great. Danny, you're obviously coming at this from a point of more neutral place. What do you think it looks like to make it fair for everybody? If you had a magic wand and you could set the rules for everybody, what does it look like?
Yeah, I think just going off what Andrew was explaining, like there's a long history of both sides of the counter accepting this symbiotic relationship where you're never, there's no reason to hope that books would just be like charitable and take action that's not in their interests, right? Whether it's sharpening their lines or a bunch of other things like that, it can be a win-win for both sides. And, I had Matt Metcalf at Circa. I mean, I don't pretend to be a business expert, and there's, different ways of thinking about this, but he believes very strongly, sort of go like what Andrew was saying, that, if you take a much bigger volume of bets and have a smaller hold, that's it's gonna net out better for you in the long run. So it's a philosophical difference, but there's smart people who believe strongly about that. I think as far as change goes, I think maybe some of this, as disappointing as it sounds, has to just be a free market thing where certain books sink or swim based on, what customers think of them. But I would be hopeful, and I don't have any reporting on this from regulators, but I'd be hopeful that some of the stuff that just screams unfairness could be policed a little bit better. Like a bunch of people told me that, and I don't want to bungle the language here, but they described a situation where like they get a promotion, and in order to withdraw, they have to bet through a number of times. But if they're limited to like 15 cents a
Yeah.
bet.
How did you get through it?
Dollars. So like that's not
That happened to you, Razor, not that long ago.
Danny, there are probably close to 100 people live in here right now that have had to roll through thousands of dollars with $1 bets. You're preaching to the choir right now.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. Maybe I'll write about that next time, but that seems ridiculous.
Well, and it's just so blatant, right?
Hey, Ray, Adam, sorry to cut you off. There's a few people that have asked questions to the Q&A. They want to be anonymous. I don't know, Ray, if you want to go through a couple of those or not. I'll leave that with you.
Let me just get caught up on them. You guys keep talking.
Here, we'll keep talking, Ray. You figure out how you're going to ask these the right way. Hey, sir, there are more provinces, like right now in Canada, which provinces have completely rolled it out? It's Ontario and BC only, correct?
No. So on April 4th, single game sports betting became, it was actually August of the previous year. Single game sports betting became legalized across Canada, but it got left to the provincial level to actually
implement
and execute. So what you've seen across Canada is government-run sports books in almost every province. And then Ontario
many are going to start rolling out more options for people, right? Ontario and BC kind of leading the way in that.
I'd shake my head to that. I would say that Ontario's rolled it all out. Alberta will be next, and who knows how long the rest of it could take or be.
Right. Yeah, I know. From what we're hearing, it sounds like Alberta is limited. You and I were talking about this the other day. How nice it would be if somebody would set the gold standard, right, that everybody else would have to follow. It would be so nice if there was just one group or one province or one state that nailed it in terms of fairness, so that everybody else could see, it works for everybody, right? Because it would be an interesting experiment, right? Like, what would the overall revenue look like in a region that does operate from a sense of fairness?
I think Danny, that's a huge goal of mine. We haven't touched on that, but I don't even care where it is. I want to win a state or a province so bad. I want to set that gold standard. So I want to set it so bad where we go, you know what? You live in Canada, go to Alberta. You have no excuse. You can go there. You can play fairly with the operators and not worry about anything. Go to Colorado. Colorado's set up exactly how we intended. And as new states roll out, that presents new opportunities. So I would just say from that standpoint, Danny, as you get more involved with this story, if you do, just keep us in mind with anyone that you think we could benefit from talking to, because we definitely are, we're a speck of dust in the grand scheme of things, but I think we're a solid representation of a decent chunk of people that know how to win money from betting on sports. But also have been exposed to the dark sides of it, but also we've been exposed to the books that do know how to do it right, and we use them regularly.
Yeah, for sure. Razor, do you want to ask some of these questions, buddy?
Well, I mean, we've gone over some of this stuff. Like the first person just talks about a job posting from a sportsbook saying that the job, so it's a job posting for a VIP associate, and he just thinks it's funny that they're saying part of their job is to upsell. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's that funny.
It's pretty funny.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting, right? I mean, you're a host and your job is to upsell, which means your job is to get them to put more money into the sports book.
Yeah. I mean, it's very contradictory to all the advertisements about safe and responsible gaming, but
yeah, I actually think
it's not surprising is what I should say.
I think this is a question for Dan. I think this is great. Danny, do you feel the regulators are unwilling to intervene because of revenue governments receive from the sports books? And this is, when I first reached out to you, Danny, this is what I said. The reason I was so grateful that you wrote this is the reason that nobody else will or other people won't is because the sports books are advertising so much with all of the major news publications out there and all the media conglomerates. They're not going to go against, they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. We just know that's not the case. And so if the taxation is feeding the government coffers, how likely do you think is it that the government would side with the player when it's the books that are buttering their bread, so to speak?
Exactly. And especially in the early stages where they brought it in as a way to bring in tax revenue, and then they're going to immediately tell the sports books how to do their job. It's like they at least got to sit back and listen before they just respond right away. But sorry, I know that question was meant for Danny.
No, absolutely. I mean, did you guys see the big New York Times expose on legalization in the U.S. a couple weeks ago? So there, missed it. If you only read the Washington Post, that's fine with me. But I think that things like that can put some heat on regulators. It was basically showing how there was this, giddiness to get this tax windfall, and maybe there was some boxes that weren't checked in the process. So no, as you were saying earlier, this is very, in the second inning. So no reason to be too cynical that none of this can change.
Yeah, and I think too, there's definitely been a bit of a shock, and you've really seen that in the stock prices across the betting landscape. It's pretty obvious to follow. You saw the craze, companies like Penn National Gaming, DraftKings trading at crazy price per earnings ratios. And that's really come back down to earth after earnings were reported. And you looked at DraftKings earnings quarter after quarter, and they weren't profitable, or they were turning a really small profit well below projections. And that's where I have been just baffled, in that DraftKings has tried to do the Uber model, where they buy up the market. They give you the best hosts, the best VIP program, to the point that you lose money to buy up the market. But I don't know about you guys, even when I was a recreational bettor, even my friends, we used a couple of different sports books. It wasn't like everyone's like, you got your DraftKings app ready, man, and you're all just on DraftKings. Just never how it was. There was all people in the room. One was using 365, one was using Sports Interaction, one was using Pinnacle. A few of us were using 2 or 3. And, they're trying to buy up the whole, betting landscape. And I just don't think that that's the way that this industry works. I don't think you can do the, give everyone great promotions and cheap prices and then run everyone out of business and ramp the prices up afterwards model. And that's where I think, from the government side of things, they've been a little bit stunned with the lack of profits that have been turned from some of these major companies that, again, I don't think they're running their books as well as they could be. And that's why, a lot of these problems have been occurring.
What the books need is more markets that they can balance, right? Like for us, we have to know how to win on the main markets if we're going to be profitable long term. But there's no reason why they should ever limit on those main markets outside of something completely unreasonable, right?
I agree.
So I think I do see why they limit on these smaller markets, but that's got to be reasonable too.
And that's where those maximums come in. If so to give you an example, Danny, who's a prominent receiver? Let's say Jamar Chase gets hurt, right? And someone comes in for Jamar Chase that is a low volume rookie third string type guy, but he gets his chance. Maybe he catches the first pass on the drive, catches 2 or 3 more on that same drive, and you're like, holy shit, this guy's looking good. What the world of fantasy football does is they start placing waiver claims for him. Something that we might do is we might go, hey, what does he pay to actually score a touchdown in this game? And the books will have that improperly handicapped. That's an example of a bet that's taking very, very little volume. And if they turned around and said you can only profit $200 or $500 on that market total, versus say 10, 20, 50,000 potentially on him getting a touchdown in the game, because we actually did gain an edge, I would support that 100%.
Yeah.
Whereas, what Ray's saying is he's saying, if we profited because the Bengals, money line hit in the game, what are we supposed to do there? We're just taking your bets. That's like going to the table and hitting on red instead of black at the roulette wheel and then being punished for it.
They should be thankful for that volume if there's the opportunity to balance it. So
yeah, for sure, guys. This has been. Oh, go ahead, Danny.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, when I talk to some bookmakers, like, they're obviously sympathetic to the concept of limits, but a lot of them said, they sort of rolled their eyes and said it's ridiculous when you can't get down $100 on Sunday for an NFL game. That doesn't make a ton of sense. So
yeah, for sure.
Hey, Danny, can I just say really quickly, Adam, before we sign off here?
Yeah.
Maybe this is something for you to think about, that you can contact Adam or Ray or myself with, Danny, but if you do, there's just so many questions for you in our Q&A right now that we're not going to be able to get to. Do you recommend that people do reach out to you, or will that be too overwhelming for you? Or
I love that. Like, my biggest thing is that, I'm not an expert on this, but I am very enthusiastic to hear from people and try to tell these stories that need to be told. So I'd love to be in touch with you guys, and I'd love to be in touch with any of your listeners. So feel free to reach out.
What's the best way to reach out to you? Just fire you an email?
Email's cool. Twitter DMs are cool.
Sweet.
Whatever it takes, yeah.
Sweet. What's your Twitter handle so we can all give you a follow?
My name, Danny Funt, Funt.
Sweet. Thanks, Danny. Go ahead.
Sorry, guys. This was such a great show and so overdue, right? Like when we first decided that we were going to take this podcast public and do this, it represented an interesting challenge because, it's a show about sports betting, and most of the techniques that we use, we learned through, from Andrew and inplayLIVE. And of course, we're not allowed to share any of those techniques unless you're a member, right? Like, that's how it works. You got to sign up to learn these techniques. That's to protect their business in terms, speaking of fairness. So it was a really interesting challenge when they said, okay, guys, you're going to do a show about sports betting, but you're not allowed to talk about any of the things that you bet on a regular basis, which, represented a really, really interesting challenge. This show was exactly what I was hoping for when we went down this road. The goal of this show is to both educate and entertain. I feel like we checked both of those boxes today. We did. It was great. Like, this was a great show, you guys. Danny, thanks so much for writing the article and for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again sometime real soon. Pacer, great job as usual. And there are a few people out there who worked as hard as you have to enhance the experience that bettors have had. So, and with the lobbying and all that stuff. And Razor, you were awesome as usual, and I was outstanding. So how do we beat this? Like, this show was a 10. Let's go. We'll see. I don't know how we're going to top this next week, but we're going to try. This is great, you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see everybody soon. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
This was the Ray and Adam Show, brought to you by inplayLIVE. Sign up now for inplayLIVE by using the exclusive Ray and Adam link and promo code.